Hi, everyone. My name is Erik. Welcome to this webinar. Super excited to see all of you here. And as we all know, the compensation review process, it's one of those critical moments in HR. It's not just about number crunching, it's also recognizing all the hard work and dedication of the teams. One of the things that we see from Effective People with our customers is that every year there's 2 new releases that you want to maybe consider some capabilities from. You probably also did a lessons learned from last year, where there's also some things that worked really well and other things that worked not so well. And you might also have questions and requirements of different parts of the business. So preparing for your compensation cycle, that's not a re-implementation of the compensation module, but it is a process that you need to handle, and you also need to set aside time for it. So in today's session, we'll be diving into some practical tips and strategies that you can start with right now to ensure your next compensation cycle is the most successful one yet, and help you reduce some of the pain points that you experienced the last cycle and use the system to its best capabilities. Grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get started on doing this. So topics including an introduction overview of us. We'll talk about preparation activities. So what are the things you need to do prior to starting the compensation campaign? We'll talk about items, how to launch and run your compensation campaign. We'll also cover reporting on compensation data, because the system has some nice built-in features and also some advanced capabilities in report story to really get insights out of your data. And then last but not least, we'll also cover some of the recent system improvements, those that came out in the first half. And we also have a sneak into what's coming up in the second half, because most of you will be running your salary campaign in January, February, March next year, which means that the second half release of this year will also be impacting what you will see. As Ane mentioned, my name is Erik. Been working with Effective People for more than 20 years. One of my specialty areas is compensation management. And with me, I also have Tom Fisker, who is one of our professional certified specialists that have helped a number of companies around the world with implementing and getting compensation and variable pay up and running and working. So let's just jump straight into it. Preparation activities. It always starts with preparation. These are the behind-the-scenes work that makes the magic happen. And just like you wouldn't start cooking a gourmet meal without gathering your ingredients first, you shouldn't dive into the annual salary review without laying down a solid foundation. So in this section, we'll be walking through the key tasks and prep work that you need to focus on before you click the button, as we like to call it, before you hit the button that launches the salary forms. And it's not just about checking boxes, it's about reducing risk, making sure you don't have any people that are getting a salary review that shouldn't, and vice versa, and that all the budgets and numbers are accurate and correct. So there's a number of things you need to do. So from a high level, we like to say that the preparation falls in 4 steps. So first of all, there is a review step. And this is something that you should do immediately after you complete your compensation cycle. Identify what went well, what did not go so well, what should we try to avoid next year, what were some of the root causes for things that did not go well. There's always humans, and it's IT, so there's always things that never go, that don't always go as we originally planned. And sometimes there's not a lot to do, but sometimes it's also because there were things that we overlooked. So plan action on reported system issues. If you had a lot of managers complaining about wrong employees in the worksheet, or the budgets weren't calculating correct, or people could not understand the emails that was sent from the system, or the emails that were actually never received, make sure you document, you do a lessons learned once you complete your salary review, and keep them for the next time you start preparing. Now, you might not have done that. You might have done it, but if you've done it, that's good. If you have not, then try to think back and do a lessons learned now. Next is to start planning. And that is making sure you're aware of the capabilities, new features that has come out since you last ran the salary review. It could also be to review features that you're not using that were already part of the system back when you implemented, but that you chose not to. So we have customers who are not using budgets, who are not using market data, who are not using guidelines, who are not using integrated performance ratings for different reasons, because they were maybe not relevant, 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, but they're there now. And maybe it's time to do a little revamp and say, well, is there something that we should change in our compensation campaign? Then there is the configure phase. Configure, that's where you make changes to your template. You always need to create a new template. Often that's a duplicate of last year's template, and then with changes to it. You might also upgrade to new features, features that were not used last year, but have been made available. Sometimes these are simple clicks, check boxes you need to just check. Other times it's more complicated. And also more rare cases, it's also about rewriting a business rule, for example, for eligibility purposes, where the old business rule was maybe too complex, maybe it had mistakes or errors in it. It made some people eligible who should not be in, or vice versa, or maybe your eligibility requirements have changed since last year. So configure is typically where companies call us and say, help, we need some guidance, we need some support. Last but not least, testing and migrating. That's where you test the process end to end. Often this takes place in a QA system or development system. Migrate means copying to production. Quite often the preparation activities take place in 2 instances only, a QA instance and a production instance. If you have a more complicated landscape, then it can also involve moving or copying configuration between different instances. Please do make sure you launch a worksheet and you run it through all the way through to completion at least once, so you know exactly what's happening. Make sure you review and test the solution according to the test scripts that you used last year or you used when you originally implemented, so you are aware that you have tested various scenarios, both with full-time employees, part-time employees, people that were hired during the year, eligible, ineligible, hourly paid employees, monthly paid employees, and so forth. Do test different scenarios sufficiently so you don't have any unexpected things happening during your compensation campaign. So, summary, your next cycle starts when your current cycle ends, so start planning already then. Do maintain a list of issues and pain points that you experience, because only if you remember them can you do something about it. Otherwise, you keep repeating the same problems year over year. If you do not conduct a lessons learned session with a small, we're not asking you to or recommending to have a large group of people, but a small cross-section of employees that you have as your reference point, not just in HR, not just in the compensation team, but also some managers, so you can find out what is it exactly that they are thinking, what's the experience of them. Of course, if you're already doing surveys, you can build in a Qualtrics survey as part of the salary review process if you want to, or something similar. That's, of course, also really, really cool. So you have some more numerical data, but also a more qualitative lessons learned session can also be done. Make sure that during the 6 to 9 months where you're not in the annual salary review cycle, there will be at least 1 release, sometimes also 2 releases coming to you. Although the compensation module is one of the more mature modules in the SuccessFactors suite, so it's not heavy on new capabilities. There are at least 5-7 features every single release that you should be considering. Often the small, and that does not include the mandatory UI updates where the UI just gets so some updates and is improved incrementally, but it is really features that you should be considering. So new ways of handling budgets, new ways of handling currency conversion, new ways of handling the the authorizations for more decentralized administration. So these are features that you should really be aware of because they can be relevant for your case. Make sure you test in a test or QA system before you do move into production. So it's very important to have this two instance approach also in the annual review. We have customers who say, well, we'll just set it up and directly in production. Yes, it's doable. We have done it before, but we've also seen some mishaps. So it is really recommendable to set up in a test system. And then, of course, comes the case, what if the test system doesn't have the latest, wasn't refreshed recently? Do we have a salary template that reflects last year, or were there changes made to the salary template in production so we actually don't have it in test? Well, this is also something to be aware of. Make sure you have checklists, follow support materials available from SAP. And also, if you have been implemented by Affected People, we also provide customers with an annual update cycle guide with some checklists and also references to materials from SAP that you can use to build your own annual cycle process. And as always, you're welcome to include your support team, your support partner, Affected People, hopefully with any issues, and we can also run the process for you entirely if that is a requirement. Now let's have a look at some of the activities that you need to do when you do prepare, the things, the activities that you need to go through. So first of all, there is a route map. The route map, that's the process. Often it does not change, but there might be cases where as a customer you say, well, we had a 3-level approval last year, and now we want to cut it down to a 2-level approval, or vice versa. You might also have, and we recommend having due dates on certain steps in the roadmap. Those dates should also be configured to be updated to this year's cycle. If you did not use due dates on roadmap steps last year, we would recommend you to insert due dates, because those due dates, they trigger certain email notifications and also notifications in the SuccessFactors homepage. So managers are nudged kindly if they are approaching a due date and missing it. Lookup tables are heavily used in most compensation processes that we have seen. It's a really good idea to prefix lookup tables with a year. So if you have a budget lookup table, it's not just called budget 1, budget 2, but it's called 2020 budgets, 2021, 2022, and so forth. And this is something that you can do when you copy or duplicate your template, but you can also manually go in and adjust lookup table names so they reflect a good name, follow a good naming standard. If you do change lookup table names, then also remember to change where they are referenced in the configuration, because that does not happen automatically. Eligibility rules. This is probably one of the areas that's most complicated, I would say, if we're looking across all of these items in this list here, because eligibility rules can be very complicated. They can also be very simple, but often eligibility rules are used to filter out employees that should not be part of the salary review, or that should only be eligible for certain elements. So you might have some people that are eligible for a merit adjustment, but not for a one-time payment. Eligibility rules are used for that and can be more or less complicated. You would always want to create a new eligibility rule for a new salary cycle, although it is possible to reuse and just update. Good idea is to create new eligibility rules. Template dates, quite important, makes sense. The compensation module reads typically from Employee Central and publishes back to Employee Central. In the simplest of cases, it's just 2 dates. When do we read from and when do we publish back? More complicated cases, there might be different publish back dates to Employee Central via lookup table. So depending a little bit on configuration, there might be some things to do, more or less things to do. Salary range tables or other market data Often that would then, if it's custom, then would be lookup tables. But if it's market data, you would want to update salary ranges in compensation, or update the date that the pay ranges are read from Employee Central, which also relates to the template dates. Guidelines. Guidelines are often used. Some companies choose not to use guidelines, but if you chose not to have guidelines last year, consider whether you want to have guidelines this year. And if you are using guidelines, well, quite often the guideline data needs to be updated because budgets are changing, lookup tables are changing. Guidelines should also reflect so that you are roughly aiming to not overspend on your budget when you launch your forms if you have guidelines. And of course, leaving in some space for managers to provide salary adjustments. Currency conversion tables. The compensation module reuses the currency conversion in Employee Central, but you want to make sure that you can configure this to be different, but you should ensure that the currency conversion rates reflect latest and greatest. Often that's part of the Employee Central work stream, but if you want to be sure, just make sure that your currency conversion table is also updated. And last but not least, in this page here, performance rating sources. If you have integrated your salary review with performance management, then the current cycle will also be pointing or need to point to a new performance management form. And depending a little bit if anything major has changed there, if they have introduced a new rating category, they might have gone from a 5-level rating scale to a 6-point or a 3-point scale, or reversed or something. That will, of course, also impact guidelines if you're doing that. But if the performance process is more or less the same, then it's just a matter of pointing to the current year's performance cycle, and then you'll be fine. Yeah, let's continue. There is a lot. Budgets, mentioned that before. So often that's a lookup handle with a lookup table. But if you're looking to change the way budgets are calculated, it might have been that last year you used only country, and this year you want to use a matrix of country and business unit, or vice versa. There can be cases where you need then to change also the way budgets are calculated. Statements are also something that is yearly based. You can copy last year's statements, or you can create brand new ones. The system, or SuccessFactors, so SAP has released new statement templates where the content is placed in different places. Up until last year, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, you could only have a static piece of text, and then you could have this fields from the salary form in the top right-hand side of the form. Now there's different ways of different places to place the fields from, and also merge into the text if that is needed. That's also a supported capability. But you need to create new statement templates and also assign it to the compensation template itself. Field-based permission updates, if you're using that, if you're not using it, you should consider to use it, because we always want to strive to make life as simple as possible for planning managers. And that means we're able to, for example, hide fields for a manager where the field is more relevant. It's needed for different reasons for the comp and ben team, but for managers, well, they don't need to see the field. Then you can use field-based permission or compensation field-based permission to hide fields for managers. So that it's still in the form, comp and ben team can see it, but we don't need managers to see it. Compensation profile, if you're using that, there's a possibility to show historical data in there. There's different ways of getting historical data. One of them is to show it in the compensation profile. So you can add previous year's salary review into the compensation profile. So you have a visual way of displaying salary history for a person. On to reporting. New templates are included in reports and dashboards. More complicated than it sounds, because when you build a report story, the starting point for the query is always a compensation template, meaning that if you want to have a report story to point to this year's compensation process, you need to rebuild the query. A little bit tedious, but it can be done so that the report continues to work on this year's cycle. There might also be cases where you need to update scheduled jobs. This is done in provisioning, does require SAP or partner to do it. These scheduled jobs are used to perform certain calculations and movements, and often it's something that needs to be done only once per compensation cycle. But do remember to ask if you are in doubt. And SAP support can do it, or Affected People support can also do it. Now, when it comes to variable pay, this is more complicated than what we can cover in this session here. There is a lot of variable pay is very data intensive. We are aware of that, and if you are using variable pay, you will also be aware of that. There is a number of data files that needs to be prepared and imported in the right order, and testing this is rather complicated. It adds time to the preparation activities. So business goals, earnings table, employee history. If you're not using Employee Central employee history, then you can import directly bonus plan data and also business goal weights, all before you can actually do the bonus calculation in variable pay. So yeah, import files for variable pay, that's a separate chapter in your annual cycle, that's for sure. A few things recommended on the testing and migration for your compensation cycle preparation. Something to do in your development or the QA instance. Please do always complete one full end-to-end test, at least for one form. We do recommend multiple. Create a test plan, reuse what we have delivered, or check SAP samples or build your own. So that you test different cases. Again, it's not a re-implementation, but since you're doing this one time per year only, there might be new people involved. There might be things that you have forgotten. It's always better to find out things in prior to production. I think everyone agrees on that. And then, yeah, essentially test and make, practice making changes, and also simulating things that happen. So a manager leaves during the process, or someone urgently needs to be moved from one team to another. These are things you should try out and become familiar with in your QA before you move to production, because if they happen in production, you'll sleep a lot better and you will have a lot fewer worries in production than if you have to find out these things when they actually happen. When it does come to production, we also recommend doing maybe not an end-to-end, because you might not want to publish to Employee Central, but you want to be able to, you want to at least create a salary form and route it through a couple of steps in the route map, so you're sure that it works fine, that the data appear fine in the route map, and the calculations, the budget, and the guidelines, they also function as intended. Also, if you have any field-based permissions, that they also hide and show fields as you're expecting. All righto, good. I think we have summarized this, and you'll have this slide here. Planning happens quite a lot. We often talk about planning happening just before you launch the compensation campaign, but there are certain things that you should start thinking about months before. And especially if you have new administrators that need to be trained in the module, if you have new processes or new rules for your eligibility, these are things you should try to test and validate as early as possible. So it's not something that happens just the week before you launch, because a week before, or even a few weeks before, the solution should be rather stable and preferably not undergo a lot of changes, because we don't want to change things up until the date of the launch. So now we are at the date of the launch, and I would actually like to hand over to you, Tom. So you take us through the next couple of activities. So what is it that happens? We've built the foundation. We've done everything that's needed.
You've done all the heavy lifting, and now it's just pressing the button. Isn't that true?
It's so easy. Yeah, you get to do that, Tom. Go ahead.
All right, so you can swap to the next slide. So when we've done everything that Erik talked about, we are ready to launch the worksheets. So we create the worksheets from the compensation homepage, which is the administrative interface of the compensation management module. It says here that this is done generally once per cycle, but as Erik said, you need to do testing. So you're going to be very familiar with this specific part of the module. So we can launch this based on the hierarchy. So usually when you're done with all your prepping and you've done your testing and all that, and you're actually ready to run, you will launch the forms from the top of the hierarchy. So you would enter the name of the CEO usually and launch the forms. You can also select in your testing scenarios, you can just test a single manager and check the box create for head of planning only, and then you will only get a form for that planner. Before you launch, you need to make sure that the eligibility rules has been applied. This is usually one of the biggest in terms of tickets that we receive at Effective People during the compensation cycle is clients reaching out and asking, why isn't this employee in the form? And then we get access to their system and we see that you haven't applied the eligibility rules for a few months. So they haven't actually done any testing or anything like that. So it's very important. It saves a lot of time for both the client and for us. And when you're launching the forms, it can take a few minutes. I know the warning that SAP has in SuccessFactors is that it can take a few hours or an hour to launch the process. I have never seen an hour. I would probably guesstimate, but for a very large organization, maybe 20 minutes at most. And you can also track the launch of the forms in the compensation management monitor compensation jobs. Next slide, Erik. See where we're at. And when we've launched the forms, everything, you don't need to do anything. We're done now, because you will always have exceptions. There's always exceptions. So the worksheets can be updated, and it can be done by employees changing managers, any eligibility rules. So whatever data the eligibility rules is looking at, that data might change, either because you have a reorganization or that you simply had bad data on the employee. The guidelines and lookup table can also be updated during the compensation cycle. One of the important things here is that this you can manually update yourself, or you can do as Erik said, to set up a scheduled job to do it automatically for you. That's usually what we recommend, to set it up to run like once a day during whenever it would be night for your organization, or the least amount of activity. So it's mostly because of the eligibility rules or changes in eligibility that you want to run the updates, but you also want to run or update the budget in conjunction with this. And you can see the highlighted options here, that we update the compensation worksheets to reflect any eligibility changes, if any have happened. And the second checkbox is to actually press the eligibility button or apply eligibility. And the third is updating the budget, because you don't want to remove or add employees to the compensation forms without updating the budget. If you remove one employee and not updating the budget, then the team will have a larger budget, which they might be thankful for, but that's probably not what you want to do. So it is also recommended to update all worksheets prior to do some kind of data export. You also update the compensation forms when you just enter them and press save, but you don't want to do that for hundreds of compensation forms. So running this update is a very good idea to do once in a while if you don't run the scheduled background job. Next. And then we have more tools that the compensation administrators can use, because this is only something that the compensation admin or whoever has access to the administrative interface can do. So it's possible to manually control which employees appears on a specific worksheet, regardless of hierarchy. But it's very important to add here that the employee still needs to pass the eligibility rules. If you do not pass the eligibility rules, we do not have the possibility of adding an employee. So we have 3 choices here. We can add employee to a specific form, but they need to pass the eligibility rules. We can move an employee from one form to another, and we can move a bunch of employees from one form to the other. A use case could be that you have a compensation planner or a manager that is out sick for the coming month, but not long enough for you to do any adjustments in Employee Central, because you know that that person will be back, but someone else has to do the compensation planning on behalf of that manager. And if the eligibility rules are not 100% correct, that you missed some kind of criteria somewhere, and you have employees that you don't want to be in the form, you can delete them. Next. Where are we? So route form. All right, so this is a very, very good tool for the administrators. You can still move the form within the compensation interface, but here you have the possibility of routing specific worksheets or all of the worksheets, or compensation forms as they are called. You can use compensation form and worksheet. I think SAP uses both those names, so sorry for mixing that up. But we can use the route form action to move a form from one step to the other. So we can move it from step 1 to step 2, but we can also move it from step 1 to 4, or 5 to 1, or 5 to 4, or anything like that. The biggest use case I would probably say is moving forms out of the completion stage, because after the analysis, someone realized that we need to adjust the forms a bit, and then you would go into this interface and search for that specific form if it's only one, and move it out. It's also possible to add new specific steps or create a completely new step that is not part of the route map, because you have some kind of exception that in order to bring in a third compensation planner, or whatever reason you would have. So you have some complexity to do things that you haven't really planned for. Next. And you also, thank God, have the possibility of deleting worksheets. You might launch worksheets and realize that, all right, the data is completely wrong here. We need to remove them. So you can obviously do that. There are scenarios where you might want to remove one specific worksheet altogether, and then go to the update worksheet and just add those employees that belong to that worksheet onto another manager's worksheet, or something like that. You can do it the other way around as well, to move employees from one worksheet to the other, and then you obviously want to go in and delete the empty worksheet for the manager that is no longer working with your company or is out sick for the compensation cycle. And I think that was it in terms of running the compensation cycle. It's very easy when you have set everything up and you've done all your testing.
Yeah, that's so amazing, essentially. But we also know that sometimes the unexpected does happen, which is just another reason for conducting thorough testing. Anyway, I'd like to take you through a couple of topics related to reporting, because in SuccessFactors, we have vast amounts of data, different data sets. And in the compensation module, not surprisingly, there is a lot of data that is very interesting. Luckily, we have a couple of built-in reports. So first of all, we have the so-called roll-up report that comes with the compensation module. The roll-up report follows the planning manager or the line manager hierarchy that you launched the forms with. So typically, it's a report that rolls up the data. So if you're a senior manager with several levels of managers below you, you can see your total budget, you can see the budget for your own team, and you can drill down and see where is it that we're overspending, where are we underspending. It's not intended to be a report with filtering capabilities or similar, filtering or sorting, because essentially you're viewing data in the hierarchy of the forms that were created. If you're just a line manager, the roll-up report provides no value. It's only relevant to view the roll-up report if you are at least a level 2 manager. Otherwise, you won't see anything in the roll-up report that you wouldn't otherwise see. The roll-up report is visible only from a very small icon in the right-hand side in the form inbox, or in your inbox. We have often wondered if SAP would consider to make it a little bit more visible, but as of now, as of 10 years ago and 15 years ago, it's only available from the icon in the inbox where you're looking at your form. Another report that has, and the roll-up report comes with the module. There's no configuration capabilities. It's limited in terms of what fields it displays. There's a certain logic to what fields it shows. There's no configuration capability. So we can explain to you why if you're wondering why your roll-up report displays certain fields, we can explain the logic to you if you need it. In the executive review is a report that also comes with the module. It's built in. There's no cost. There's very little configuration related to executive review. We like to say that it follows the configuration of the salary form. So if the template, if you add a field to the template, that field also gets added to the executive review report. The label of the executive review report might be changed sometimes to a different label. So in this case, it's called compensation review, but it is still the executive review report that's shown. You have possibilities you can have the executive review report in 2 different flavors, in a read-only mode or an edit mode. We do not recommend having too many people with edit mode, because in the executive review, you're looking at data from across forms, regardless of where they are in the approval flow. So if you make an edit here and someone opens the form, then they might risk being confused with who made the change to the data. Luckily, we have the audit trail, so it's not such a mystery any longer, because we have audits on it. But be aware of not giving too many people access to executive review in edit mode. There is a possibility to export executive review report and also import. The import is actually very rare. It's rarely used. And the reason is you have a possibility to export, make changes offline, and then import the changes back. Now, if you export on Monday and then import again on Friday, then you'll be having a risk of having data collisions with anything that's been changed in the meantime. So it's very rare to see anyone using the import capability. But executive review, super relevant, especially for those higher up in the approval chain. So if you are a senior leader responsible for 59 managers, you don't want to open 59 individual forms. You might want to see the data from the roll-up report, but you might also want to have a little bit more insight into specific portions of your target population. And the executive review allows to build filters and look at specific people only, where the roll-up shows you the aggregate numbers. In the executive review, you can slice and dice. And there's also some nice features that have come out in the executive review report, as Tom will explain shortly. Now, these two roll-up and executive review come together with the module SuccessFactors compensation. If you're looking at having more data-driven insights, if you want to look at deviations, if you want to do any aggregations, or where you want to do any gender pay gap analysis, there you have to move into report story. SAP is not providing any standard report stories for the compensation module. They have to be built from the ground up. You are welcome to reach out to affected people. We have what we call the insight stories, also for the compensation management module. So this is an example where you can see how many forms have we created, how many are currently ongoing, which are the steps that they're currently in, how many are completed, and also a list of compensation forms. They're of course a little bit boring, but that's one page of it. You're also able to see salary progress overview, So you can analyze whether you are closing or expanding pay gaps, if you are rewarding the people that you thought you were going to reward based on, for example, comp ratio or performance evaluation. You're also able to perform pay gap analysis based on, for example, job classification, job families, locations, business units, or combinations of all these, organization tenure, position tenure, educational level, you name it. If you have it in Employee Central, you'll be able to analyze variance and see whether you are expanding or reducing the gender pay gap. Quite important because, especially if you're within the EU, there's some new rules coming or on the way with specific requirements to perform this, and Report Story can provide you with quite a lot of that data quite easily. Yeah, just more compensation analysis, and just to show that you can do it both on absolute numbers, which is of course interesting, but also on the comp ratio. And the comp ratio allows you to compare across country borders, whereas if you're looking at absolute numbers, it makes most sense to look within country or within a single country at any given point in time. But with comp ratio, you can also, it makes more sense to compare, mathematically, it's more correct to compare comp ratio levels across countries, whereas salaries can differ due to differences in cost of living and other factors. Yeah, essentially, yeah, won't go into much more detail. You'll have the materials afterwards. If anyone is interested in hearing more about report stories for the compensation management module, you're very welcome to reach out, and we can provide you an overview of capabilities and limitations. Now we'd like to move onwards to some of the recent system improvements. And although it's already some months ago, let's just have a quick overview of some of the features. Those of you that did participate or see the solution, not the solution, but the release review from Affected People, you will recognize it. If you would like to participate in the release review, please do sign up for that. It's available on affectedpeople.com/events, where you'll be able to see the second half release review also for the compensation module. But hey, Tom, take us through a few of these release items.
All right. So compensation statements. So they made quite a big change to the standard compensation statements. So for you who do not know, there is the standard compensation statement where you can actually do the configuration in the user interface, and then you have custom compensation statements where you actually need to do some XSLT programming to get going. But with the standard compensation statement that has been improved, you now have the possibility of using multiple languages, localization for within the same statements. You do not have to build 10 different statements. If you have 10 different languages, you can just use one statement and have the translations within those. We also have the possibility of previewing the edited statement. Not that big of a difference, because before you could just save the statement and go back in the user interface and press preview, but this is also working for the localization. So if you changed language, that wouldn't work before because that didn't exist. So you also have some more capabilities. So the rich text editor options for fields, for text fields when editing a statement template has been changed. In the current version, you have the additional options for text editing, as well as options to add images or tables to the content in the template. The latter two required a custom compensation statement before. So if you just wanted to add another picture, you would need to do it as a custom statement. And if we would do it, it's a lot of hours for us to do custom statements. So we always try to push for the standard statements, because those you can also maintain yourself. They fix some issues with, or inconsistency issues with the number formatting as well. And the bulk print of statements from worksheets is the same. You can do that in the compensation forms as in the same way as you could for executive review. Not sure how many people that would use it in a compensation form, but the possibility is there now anyways. You can bulk print by the target population, and in the current version, you now have the option to to print the compensation statements in bulk based on a user rather than the planner. In order to enable this, you go to compensation home, action all plans, company settings, and then check the box for enable employee level target population for admin bulk print statement. In general, the standard statement enhancement that has been that was applied in H1 this year is a very welcome change that I would guess enable some of our customers to migrate from the custom statements that is very cumbersome to work with, that requires a lot of engagement from us, to these standard compensation statements. But there are, of course, situations where you simply don't want to use the standard statement, those we would identify during, for example, a workshop. So some minor changes that have been applied. So we can rename the label for instructions from the user interface. So previously, where it says message from HR in your bottom right corner, the standard message is instructions. We could change that before through the XML, where you would have to ask a partner to go in and change the tag in the XML, and then upload that, and then tell you to test. Now you can do it yourself. So self-service for that, which is always good. Next. Finally, the legacy executive review filters has been deleted. They were end of maintenance summer last year and were completely removed as of May this year. And one very welcome change that I would consider major, at least from the eye of a compensation admin, is the update of the My Forms page. So My Forms page is where you will manage the compensation forms. So as a compensation admin, you launch the forms at the beginning of the year, you get 500 forms, and you get it in the same inbox, and you want to validate a few of them. You know, a specific employee you want to validate on. And with the previous interface, it was impossible to find that employee. You would have to do like Control F, search for the employee, but you had more than 100 forms. You would have to go through 5 pages. Now you can simply search for the planner in question, and it takes 10 seconds. It's super good right now. Eligibility rules. So previously, the compensation and variable pay eligibility rules was using something called a basic rule scenario. This is no longer supported. Your current rules will exist, but there's a rule scenario now specifically for compensation and variable pay, and this is to reduce the risk of misconfiguration. Please update your old basic rules to the new rule set. You don't have to. You pretty much need to follow a very small configuration wizard to do it, but you need to do that with every single rule you have. Very easy to do and probably very important. Did you know that you could have the compensation statement in Teams? Maybe not, but with the integration of SAP SuccessFactors and Microsoft 365, an additional notification was added this H1 release, and that was so you can send the compensation statement through the SAP SuccessFactors app within Microsoft Teams. Please check it out. Oh, we also have a sneak peek of the second half of 2024. Please do not consider these to be implemented. SAP might change their mind and not release it this release and push it to the release after, or completely remove it. You never know, so don't take this as a promise. One of the things that I would consider a very good change is the executive review filter. So right now you can make a filter that says that we want to show every employee that is from country Sweden and has a pay grade of 4. And you can't do anything else because the or doesn't exist. So now you can search for every employee in Sweden or Denmark, and you will get a result. Very, very minor thing that will have a big impact on the filtering possibilities in SuccessFactors. the standard compensation statement, if you were to do it in your test environment, you set it up, and then you want to migrate it to your production environment, you can do that. But as soon as you export a standard statement, it's considered a custom statement. So you will no longer be able to do the configuration in your production environment in the user interface. It will be you will have to go through the code to do an additional changes. So what you need to do right now is to have your test environment on your left screen and your production environment on your right screen, and just go through all the different configuration items and set up an identical configuration, hopefully, but you have the human error involved, or human, whatever you call it, and you might misconfigure when you're doing manual changes. But with this change, you are going to be able to migrate it from test to production and still use the configuration interface of SuccessFactors. This is also a very welcome change, executive review data based on route step. So you are able to set up the executive review, or who you can see in executive review based on the step in the route map. So for example, you might want your highest level executives to only see employees that has been moved to at least the second or third step of the route map. There's no need to show people in executive review that is part of the first level or first step. So they enable administrators to control which employees show up in executive review based on route step and what form it is on. And ease permission management and tighten control for compensation administrators, because now you kind of want to run that manually, and enabling and disabling executive review can be cumbersome and misconfigured as well.
It can also open up, different use cases for executive review. Let's say that you are in Germany and you want to have a Betriebsrat, the Workers' Council approval. And today you've had to say, well, you can use executive review. We have to make sure that all forms are in a certain step. Now we can say, well, you can use executive review, and if you have managers who complete faster than others, then you have a possibility to review the data in executive review. Maybe the Workers' Council isn't a great use case, but it could also be others.
But
also,
we do not have.
Yeah.
But we do not have an I approve button yet.
That's true. There's no approval button, but you can review, and you have time to review and make changes. That's true. There's no approve button. Yeah. Anyway, by the way, this feature here is also one of those that got pushed from the first half release. So an example of something that was actually already included in the release notes for the first half. Then, due to regressing testing, they found some issues in it, and now it was pushed back to second half. Fingers crossed it will be coming this time, because it does open up for some new use cases and capabilities. But hey, conscious of time, we have been talking almost for an hour, Tom. How time flies when you have fun. There is some time for Q&A. I see, Ane, do we have I believe there's a couple of questions in the Q&A. Jen, you asked, can you share sample compensation statements with images so we can see what's possible? Sure, we're happy to include that. So we will, after this webinar, include a Q&A document, and we'll add a couple of screenshots with sample statements. Essentially, with compensation statements, if you can do it in HTML, you can do it in the compensation statement. So that's how pretty they can be, how well designed. You can do graphical, you can have images. However, general disclaimer, the more fancy they become, the more risky and the more cumbersome it also becomes to maintain. So if you want to have something pixel perfect, yes, you can do it, but it also comes at the risk of complexity and maintainability. So well, we can show a few example statements in the Q&A. Ane, do we have any more questions in the Q&A?
Yes, we do have a few questions. So the first one, would you recommend to use total compensation template today?
Tom, that's for you.
Personally, I would not recommend a new customer to start with a total compensation template. Total compensation means that you're running variable pay and compensation in the same template with the same timings and all that. I would recommend first implementing variable pay and then implementing compensation, or usually the other way around. There is the possibility of merging a compensation and variable pay template if you want to go with the total compensation route, but there's no way to unmerge it. I think that total compensation for new clients, or if you've never run the cycle before in SuccessFactors, might be a bit too complex to wrap your head around, if that makes sense. So keep them apart and then reevaluate after your first year if you want to merge them.
Great, thank you. Another question, is it possible to share more examples on dashboards and reports on compensation module using story reporting?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, the presentation does have a few samples. If you're interested in seeing more, I suggest you call us, and we're happy to share. It's sometimes seeing is believing. Adding filters, changing runtime, the changing the dimension that you're using to analyze your data can be a little bit more insightful than sending some static PDF documents. So please do reach out to us.
Did you say, Erik, that they were interactive, the reports, the dashboards?
Yeah, the dashboards are interactive, meaning you can interact with them. You can change the filters at runtime. You can also change, let's say, average salary by job family, by country. Then someone says, well, I want to know the average salary by organizational tenure. You can change the analysis dimension at runtime. So you don't need to hard code from a report developer. You don't need to hard code the different pie charts or bar charts. You can let the report consumer choose at runtime what to analyze by.
So it's pretty much working like any modern analytics tool.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question, Ane, and then we need to wrap up.
Yeah. So the last question is, can we copy a compensation statement from development to production instance?
Tom, that's for you.
Yes, you can. But it's going to be easier next release.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Next release always improves.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us today. We will send you the slides and the recording on your email. And Erik, do you want to close off?
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating. Been great to see so many. If, as always, if you are unsure of anything that you have heard or you want to have a deep dive, feel free to reach out to us, either to me or to the invitees, the person that invited you for this event, and we'll be happy to come back to you. So thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.